Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, a warm welcome to Silver Tent TV. I'm your host here, Siobhan Riordan, and Elsa, my dog, is sleeping over in the corner, but she may occasionally join in. Be prepared. Silver Tent is a global online community for women over 50. And it's there really to support women as we move into the autumn and the winter of our lives, to achieve all of those dreams that we have yet to achieve, to find ways to share our wisdom, to value and acknowledge our wisdom and find ways for sharing it out in the world, and to make sure that we live wild, wise, wonderful lives. I'm delighted here today to have Lynne Sedgmore. And you're going to hear more about Lynne's story through the show, but definitely one of the women leading the way around leadership in the world, and also that bridging and integration of the spirituality into leadership. So, Lynne, I want to begin by saying a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
We share many interests together, but I want to really acknowledge the significance of your leadership role here in the tent, which is that you're one of those initial investors right at the very beginning that heard the founder's vision, Francesca Cassini, and heard her vision, and it really spoke to you. So I think it's a great place to start. Why did you make that financial commitment?
Well, I met Francesca online and she shared her vision, and within 10 minutes I just felt a total heartfelt pull, draw, connection to what she was doing. I felt huge trust in her. I thought her vision, for me as a woman, I'm 63 now, it just felt to have an online community where we could share, we could develop, do all the things that are now manifesting, was just an amazing thing. And her vision was so strong. But most important, Francesca, it felt like this was her absolute vocation at this point in her life as an older woman. And it was just a natural, I'll invest, I'll give you support, not just with words, but with a financial investment to make it realer for her, and to bring more energy and hopefully more money into the tent. Yeah.
And it's lovely. And so, as one of the recipients of the benefits of the tent, I really want to say thank you. Thank you for you. And there was a few kind of women at the beginning that, really wanted to see this vision manifest. So for, people like me that benefit, I want to start by thanking you.
Pleasure. It's just, and what Francesca has achieved, and all the women have achieved, because it's a co-creation, is way beyond, I think, the initial sense of how big it might be. So my pleasure. I just wish I'd been more involved, and I'm ready now to get more involved, because my mother's had strokes and recently died, and family commitments and other things that have occupied my time. But I'm now in a space where I can get more involved, and I can't wait to.
We were talking earlier, and very much your work in the world grew out of your academic studies, looking at the role of spirituality within leadership and organisations. Do you want to tell us a bit about that and where that initial journey took you?
Yeah, I think I'm interested. I call myself, rather than an academic, I call myself a practitioner scholar. So I've always been an active leader manager in further education. I was a chief exec in 3 different roles over 17 years, and a dean of a business school in the late 80s. And I've always studied academically. My master's and my doctorate are both about spirituality and leadership and how you bring that into secular organisations. So it's come out of my own thirst and desire to know the divine in whatever shape or form that is, and that's changed for me over the years, and a thirst since a child to know the truth and goodness and beauty and the divine. So I haven't been able to separate in my life my professional work and the sense of spirituality that was imbued everything that I was and everything that I did.
It's really interesting because my work in leadership, I led development of the first postgraduate programme in women's leadership in the UK. And that grew out of my master's and the research that I conducted. And actually, I was looking at women's organisations at the time. So I'm going back to the mid-1990s here. And there was a real struggle with the whole notion of leadership and of claiming leadership and of owning leadership. And it's one of the reasons why I went on to set up the course, was to give permission and say, actually, leadership is the skill to achieve goals in life. Then that makes leadership an issue for every woman, regardless of what your role in life is. If you have a goal, it's your leadership that gets you there.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And the very first women's, it was Women into Management, actually, in the mid-90s. So I did wider opportunities for women, WIMS, Women into Management, and then was Dean of a Business School in 1989. So it was really looking at what is this resistance, this fear, and I worked for the GLC, the Greater London.
Yeah.
Do you remember those days?
Oh my God, I do. Look at the affectionate smile. It's when all the lesbians and the women with babies invaded the GLC. I loved it.
Absolutely. So I was an equalities trainer there, part-time, not full-time, during that time. And it was just magnificent. But then that was when I realised that women's relationship with power, or rejection of power, was so fundamental. And for me, I'm not frightened of power. I never have been. I quite like power. The difference was I wanted power for and power with and power through. I didn't like the dominator hierarchy. I've always felt a huge resistance to that. So I wanted power. And as I say, I rose quite quickly in terms of dominator hierarchies in further education to become a senior leader. I was 34 when I became a head of department. So I was a senior leader for about 30 odd years. So I had a lot of time being able to experiment and push the boundaries and encourage other women and men. I think it's about empowering everyone. But my particular passion was to really work with women in terms of the blocks and the aspirations, and to empower into their strength and their wisdom and their ability to step forward and just co-create organisations that were far more flowing and liberating and successful. Yeah, very much.
You remind me so much of Starhawk back in the 70s and the 80s, because she was one of the leading women trying to find new ways of expressing, because there was this real reluctance around power, wasn't there? And actually, you reminded me academically in the end. I love that practitioner scholar, by the way. I always call myself a fraudulent academic. I'm a terrible academic. I never published. But for me, I was part of social change. And one of the things that I worked out was, if you want something to change, then you have to have somebody from a university say it needs to change. And that was one of the reasons why I placed myself. And I actually had a vision when I did my research and wrote about it, that I wanted one day to be read out in Parliament. I wanted my research quoted about why we needed to support women. And about 8 years later, lo and behold, I am quoted an International Women's Day in Hansard. All of my research, almost verbatim, read out by an MP. But it's the Australian Hansard. It's not the UK Hansard.
Well, congratulations.
I know, it's a great example of manifesting, but not quite getting it right.
Well, and on that, two things that you said. On that, my claim to fame was when I was Chief Exec of the National Centre for Excellence in Leadership, which was the Further Education Leadership Centre. Alan Johnson, when he was the Secretary of State, actually said that CEL, as we called it, CEL, was a successful, he read it out in Parliament, was successful, and how rare it was for a politician to be able to say that when they'd launched a national initiative. We had it all up on the walls. We were like children. I want to come back to Starhawk, because I actually shared a platform with her this year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, with Starhawk in Glastonbury.
Yeah, that's where I met her, many years ago.
Yeah, so what happened for me is I was an ardent feminist in the late 70s, early 80s, then fell into further education, loved it, got promoted, was able to do these things. So really then went into the mainstream and then stayed there because I was having a ball and I think making a lot of change. Worked as a lobbyist for the last 7 years at Number 10, with Number 10 and at senior level. But where I am now is I've come out of the mainstream. I'm 63, I retired at 60. So I'm back now feeling much more akin to my early feminist days, supporting women. And I've just launched the Goddess Luminary Wheel. So what I'm doing now, I've worked on Soul of Leadership for 5 years, which was looking at contemplative approaches to leadership. But this is trying to go beyond patriarchy and to say, what's a leadership paradigm that's not built and developed within patriarchy, but comes out of a goddess spirituality. So that's why I was sharing a platform with Starhawk. Literally, I followed her and I was able to say, I've developed this Goddess Luminary Wheel. Starhawk is in all the places around the wheel. She's an incredibly wise woman. She's kind of really traveled the whole wheel. So that's where I am now. It's kind of, I've come full circle because I loved her in the 80s and I still love her work. And now I'm really an activist again within Goddess community and within Goddess spirituality, bringing a leadership development. And I've got these amazing women and a few men who've stepped forward. And it's the same thing about stepping into their power, not being distracted by their kind of negative connotations of power and leadership, and stepping forward. Yeah.
I love that, and I want to hear a bit more about the luminary, but you just reminded me, in the end, I actually had to come up with a definition. Obviously, when you work academically, everything begins with.
Sure.
But I found a definition. I can't remember who it was by, and if I remember, I'll share it in the text around this. But I came up with a definition that really worked for me, which is power is the ability to get things done by mobilizing internal and external resources in the pursuit of a goal.
Yeah.
And somehow or other that spoke to women. It became a notion of power that they got comfortable with. Yeah. But would you say we still struggle with power?
I think some women do, and less, perhaps, hopefully less women do. I think what women have to do, where the metaphors I'm working with on power at the moment are, power's been used as currency, almost like money. I have it or don't have it, I can give it away or I keep it, rather than power as currency, as in terms of energy and electricity and something that's everywhere that you tune into and you harness, and everybody can have it. You see what I mean? And then you look at how that flows and exactly what you said, what purpose is it serving? Yes, not the selfish ego, because the question I always ask people is, who are you serving? What are you serving? Which sense of self are you serving from? And who and what are you serving? And it shifts the whole purpose and rationale and meaning of leadership to a whole different place.
And I love that notion of power as energy, because there's something in there that neutralizes that shame that many women had. I mean, when I did my research, we'd come out of the kind of collectivism of the 70s and the 80s, but there was such shame still around that ownership of power, because and I never forget one woman saying in my research, I would rather be the oppressed than the oppressor.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was, what she associated with power.
Yeah.
So tell me, Lynne, if I were on your course now,
Right.
now that you're kind of bringing, because the Silver Tent is all about understanding our wisdom and finding ways of taking it out in the world. So you're a beautiful role model for that. If I were on your course, what would I be learning about, and what would I be exploring with you?
Okay, you would start off by really, really looking at what does authentic leadership mean for you? What is your very own personal sense of purpose, of visioning and values, but what is your authentic leadership? And then relating that to your sense of the divine as well. So what is, I'm calling it goddess gnosis. And what is that for you and for someone else, for a Christian or someone else? It would be, what is your knowing, your gnosis of that spiritual sense of yourself? We look at paths of power. We look at ways of knowing. We look at states of being. Presence is at the heart of the whole process and the whole model. Being present, being appropriate, being timely. And then we do it through a beautiful mix of the elements and the moons, drawing in natural, if you like, more shamanic approaches as well with the leadership. So as well as sort of rational looking at things, we have intuition, so the ways of knowing around the wheel are the mind knowing. We look at the latest in neuroscience. We look at emotional intelligence, the heart. We look at the gut. We look at what embodiment means. So it's a real interweaving of a spiritual, shamanic goddess approach with the best that I know of leadership. And it's a model. It's not like in the academic world, this is the model, you follow it. It's like, this is a framework that I've put together. Bigger I think, have put this together. And how does this work or not for you? And play with it and move it and mix it and work out what it means for you. And they started to do that on the first weekend. They go, oh yeah, well I put this there. And I'm like, great. Because then it becomes a living model for yourself to express who you were. We'll do projects. The second year looks at it from an organizational perspective. And I'm just loving it. I'm so excited.
It sounds incredible. And you reminded me, we often concluded at the end of the leadership course that, that the essential ingredient for effective leadership is self-awareness.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like that's a course that's really going to take you to the heart of that.
Yeah, I've actually got awareness and adaptability, authenticity, and another A that's just slipped me, that are in that sense of what is your state of being, how aware, and this second weekend, which is the air weekend on the element, focuses around self-awareness tools, self-awareness approaches, and constantly being aware. And I like the notion of a leader-full organisation. Starhawk talks about that years and years ago, and I think it's beautiful. It's that organisations, communities are leader-full, that we're all taking on leadership roles as and when there's a flow to that. Yeah.
You really remind me there. I had the great privilege of training in shamanism with Native Americans in the States.
Right.
And you remind me there of something that I've experienced with women organising, is the power of goose leadership. And they have that teaching of, you have someone flying the way until either they don't know the way or they get tired and they go back into the flock and someone else flies up. And I love that whole idea of goose leadership as a way of some of the new ways that women want to bring to the whole leadership paradigm.
Yes. Absolutely.
I'm so aware I think we need to do a part two, don't we? I'm aware of the time and we haven't even really started. I know you're on your first cohort for this new course. So in 2019, will you be looking at another cohort?
Yeah, I've filled it with more people than I'd anticipated. So yes, and I've got 6 people who want to join already for next year. So I will be running another cohort from November 2019. Yeah,
wonderful, good.
And it's if it's right for women. It isn't something. Yes, I want to kind of let people know about it, but I don't want to push it. I want it to attract the right people for whom it feels a soulful, true, heartfelt journey. Yeah.
Lynne, you're a remarkable woman. It's been a real privilege to sit here and talk with you about a subject I'm passionate about too.
Yeah. And I hope we have more conversations.
Oh, we will. I think most definitely. To all of you out there, I hope you've enjoyed this show and a little taste of women talking about leadership. And thank you for listening. And we look forward to being with you again very soon. If the sun isn't shining in your skies, may it be shining in your heart. This is Siobhan signing out. Bye-bye.